C minor opus 111, played by Boris Goldberg. The time right now is coming up to 35 minutes past 8, and joining me in the studio is film critic Howard Elias. Good morning.
Good morning. I am officially tired of the cold weather.
It's only been a couple of days.
It's enough. Bring on the humidity. Bring on the heat.
Not the humidity, but heat, yes. Okay. Right, so we're going to be talking about The Shape of Water.
What's your favorite color?
My favorite color?
Yeah.
Gold.
Oh, interesting. Only the best, right? Mine happens to be teal, and there's a lot of teal in this movie. So
I like teal.
I
I
love
also
teal.
like plum.
Yeah, plum's nice, yeah. Now, if you're the kind of person who can stare at a Pantone fan deck, you know what a Pantone fan deck is? You know, one of those books of Pantone swatches, color swatches. You know, if you're going to paint your walls or something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right? There are like thousands of colors.
Exactly.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Well, there you go. So if you're that kind of person, and I'm also that kind of, if I can stare at those things for hours, you are going to love this movie just for its use of color alone. Because who knew that there could be so many shades of teal? There's a lot of teal in this movie.
Lots of paint companies.
Now, the film is set in 1962. It's the height of the Cold War in America. And at a post-industrial government facility on the outskirts of Baltimore, Zelda Fuller, who's played by Octavia Spencer, and Eliza Esposito, who's played by Sally Hawkins, they work as cleaners on the graveyard shift. And both women who have been marginalized by society are relegated to being what is referred to, rather, in the vernacular, piss wipers by their all-male bosses at their facility. Now, Zelda is African American, and in 1962, that's enough to put you on the sidelines. Eliza has been mute for most of her life, the result of someone cutting her neck when she was a baby. And today she's left with 3 scars on the side of her neck as a reminder. Now, Eliza lives in a tiny studio above an old school cinema, which, by the way, is the movie was filmed in Toronto. And that's the Elgin Cinema, in case you're a filmie and you want to know which cinema that really was. So she lives above an old school cinema at the end of a drab, narrow hallway. Her next door neighbor is Giles, played by Richard Jenkins, who's a single man who's also an outsider. He's a middle-aged commercial illustrator, and he's been unemployed for a while for reasons that are revealed later in the story. Now, Eliza's life changes when a quote-unquote asset arrives at this facility. Now, this asset is an amphibian man, and he's been caught in the Amazon and brought there so that it can be studied by Colonel Richard Strickland, played by Michael Shannon, because America wants to catch up to the Soviet Union in the space race, and they think this amphibian man is the key to get them there.
So hence why it's set during the Cold War in the early 1960s.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, Eliza sees what others refuse to acknowledge, that the creature is intelligent. So when no one is watching, she teaches it sign language, and the two of them develop a relationship. And when she overhears that Colonel Strickland plans to vivisect the creature, she hatches a plan to steer it away from the facility. But for her plan to succeed, she'll need the help of Giles, Zelda, and an unlikely ally at the facility who has his own reasons for keeping the amphibian man alive. That's all I'm going to talk about the plot.
Okay, you don't want to give away any spoilers.
Nope, that's enough. So this is I'm gonna do the reveal right now. This is my favorite film of the year.
Really?
This is number 1.
Wow.
Number 1 with a bullet.
Well, it has been nominated for 13 Oscars.
13. It's been nominated. You know what? It's received a staggering 72 awards and 232 nominations, including, and it won 2 Golden Globes, one for Best Director for Motion Picture, one for Best Original Score.
By Alexander Desplat.
Yeah, Alexander Desplat.
Get hold of that soundtrack, yes.
And as you said, 13 noms. So it's the leader in this year's Oscar race. It's certainly going to take home I think it's going to take home more than a few. It's got acting nominations for Hawkins, Jenkins, and Spencer, and of course, director Guillermo del Toro, and set design and production design and music and a whole bunch of other things. I don't know that Hawkins is going to win for Best Actress because she's up against Frances McDormand for Three Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri. So it's definitely down to the two of them, but I think Frances McDormand might actually take it home. But really just an absolutely amazing film. I loved it. This is, have you ever seen any of Guillermo del Toro's other films? He did Pan's Labyrinth and the Hellboy films. I've never really gotten into his work because they're all a little on the fantastical side. This one is the most, I'd say, approachable of all of his films. It's the most commercial of all of his films. And I would say, I'm going to call this film a masterpiece. I don't use that word very often, but I'm going to call this one a masterpiece. The IMDb Internet Movie Database calls this film an adventure, drama, fantasy, but I think that's selling it short. I think it's also a romance sci-fi musical. It's got everything. There's singing, there's dancing, there's a monster, it's a love story, and so it's got everything. It takes influences from a lot of old films from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and even the 60s. The Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954, 1940. Which one?
I remember. Yeah, that
Yep.
one.
1946's Beauty and the Beast, 1933's King Kong, 1952's Singin' in the Rain, 1951's Royal Wedding, 1948's The Red Shoes, and that's just, I stopped listing them after all because there are so many. There's also some film clips in the movie from The Little Colonel from 1935, and very interestingly, two TV shows from the 1950s and the early 60s. Mr. Ed, do you remember Mr. Ed, the talking horse? Yes, a horse is a horse, of course, right? Mr. Ed. And The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis. Do you remember that? Because I vaguely remember. That was like, I was really young when that one came out. I vaguely remember it. So those two, it's interesting, those two TV shows are not simply in the movie as an homage to the past or to set the frame, the timing, but it's a message that, and this is what I think the whole film's about, it's a message that we need to listen to the outsiders in our lives because they have strengths and abilities that often go unnoticed. So this is really a film about outsiders and insiders. And the outsider theme can also be found in the movie that is showing at the cinema below Eliza's and Giles' apartments. It's the biblical epic, The Story of Ruth from 1960, a real movie. And it recounts the tale of Ruth the Moabite, who, after becoming a widow at a young age and left with nothing, decides to hang her fate with the Jewish people. And in case you're interested, we Jewish people read her story every year on the Jewish holiday of Shavuot, which is Pentecost. Ruth's spiritual journey is reflected in Eliza's journey in The Shape of Water. And very interestingly, in the film's opening scene, which is narrated by Giles, he refers to Eliza as a princess in what is likely another reference to the biblical Ruth, because Ruth ultimately becomes the great-grandmother of King David. So she's a mother of kings. So there's another little connection there. As I was watching the movie, and they kept, you kept seeing sort of snippets of the story of Ruth, and then of course you saw the marquee on the cinema, and I kept thinking, okay, there's a reason why this movie is mentioned, and I thought, this is it. Ruth was also an outsider. This is really a film about outsiders, and very interestingly, you have Michael Shannon's character, who's really the movie's only bad guy, and he's an insider, but later on he realizes, and we all realize, he's an outsider as well. So it's very interesting about who is an insider and who thinks they're an insider and who isn't. So I really appreciated that. So I absolutely love this film. It's so pretty to look at, with the teal, and the other color that's there is red. Red symbolizing Eliza's love. So those are your two colors, and they're just it's rich. It's just gorgeous to look at. The amphibian man is played by Doug Jones, who's been in quite a few of Del Toro's films. He was He was in the Hellboy, and he was in Pan's Labyrinth as well. He's made a career of doing creatures, of doing extraterrestrial, because he's been in quite a few science fiction films where he's played extraterrestrial characters. So this is it's sort of like that's his thing, but he does it really well. So I was happy with that. Did you want to talk about the plagiarism thing?
No, it's just something that when I was reading about the film, I came across, which is fairly recent. It's been in the news in the last few days. A number of very reputable news agencies have been picking up on this story about this being plagiarized, and plagiarized from a 1969 play called Let Me Hear You Whisper. And so the son of the Pulitzer Prize winner who wrote that, Paul Zindel, David Zindel, has come forward. And so he's been mentioning all the similarities between his father's play and this movie. And so we have to watch this space, I suppose,
Yeah,
see what happens. There will be a lawsuit, no doubt.
this always happens whenever some film is hugely successful. Somebody comes forward and says, "You ripped off my father's, brother's, uncle's other films." I mean, I don't. Well, we'll see what happens. You can make the same case. It's similar to the movie Free Willy, where the character releases an orca.
Yeah,
So
and you mentioned all those other
and all the other films. Yeah, the difference between this film and, let's say, The Creature from the Black Lagoon and King Kong is that we in this film we really get to understand the creature and the intelligence of the creature more than the other films. But even if you should watch The Creature from the Black Lagoon, the creature looks incredibly similar to the amphibian man here. But I think that was intentional,
What did I read? I read somewhere here when Del Toro was in talks with Universal to direct a remake of The Creature from the Black Lagoon, he tried pitching a version focused more on the creature's perspective, where the creature ended up together with the female lead, but the studio executives rejected the concept.
Interesting. Well, so he got it done eventually.
Yeah, in a slightly different way. All right, so The Shape of Water.
Definitely go see this film. Don't see it on a little screen. You need to see it on a big screen so you can enjoy all the teal.
shades
The shades of teal. Yeah, so I'm calling this the color teal as opposed to the color purple, or you can call it fish out of water.
Elias, thank you so much.
Thanks. See you.